Hello again, it's Matthew from Matthew North Music, and today I'm in the workshop with my funny glasses. And if you like these videos, or you're interested in anything to do with music, electronics, or anything that meets in between, then please think about subscribing to the channel, because every subscriber really does help the channel to grow. Anyway, today I have in my hand this. This is a Frequency Central Eurorack power supply, and if you're into synthesizers and you own Eurorack modules, or you want to build some Eurorack modules, you need something to power it. And this board will give you the voltages you need for probably 6 or 7 Eurorack units, maybe even a few more depending on the current draw that they use. And then this just plugs into a standard 12 volt power adapter, AC power adapter, and then you get your power out of this board to power whatever you want to do. And you've got holes in the back so you can either screw it to a panel in the Eurorack case, or if you've made a case, or if you're doing Kosmo, whatever, you can just mount it in. And I've just built this, and what I thought I would do is make a video on how to build one of these, because if you've never built anything before, it might seem a little bit daunting. So I'm going to take you through this in more or less real time, so you can see me putting it together, and if you want to build it along with me, then yeah, go for it. Anyway, I'm going to go back in time about half an hour, 45 minutes to when I started making this. What we have here then is the Frequency Central printed circuit board for making a Eurorack power supply. Now I have popped in some of the components already. You'll see there's actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 diodes, and there's 3 resistors. Now the diodes handle all our rectification, and they also use here for protecting the regulators that put out our output. And we have 3 resistors. Now all the resistors are there for are just to go in series with the LEDs, because we have 3 LEDs to indicate that all our power is working. So we have a rectification then done by our diodes. We then need to have some smoothing, and for that we have 6 of these chunky capacitors. These are 4,700 microfarads, and we have 6 of those in total. And I've actually got 35 volt versions of these because they're slightly bigger, and you know, if you got a slightly higher voltage, it really doesn't matter. Now we need some other bits to go with this. We need a Eurorack power connector, which is one of these box type connectors here. We then have some more capacitors. There's some more smoothing capacitors. There's 1 microfarad and 100 microfarad capacitors, and I think there might be, it's just hundreds and one, yeah, 101 microfarads. That's all we need. So we've got some in these bags. We then have some heat sinks. Now these heat sinks are to go with our regulators. We've got our 7912 there, our 7812 here. We've also got a small regulator. This is like a sort of minimal sized regulator. You can see it looks like a small transistor, and that's a 5 volt transistor, a 5 volt regulator, sorry. And that's mostly used for driving things like LEDs and display stuff, sort of kind of low current. We then have some LEDs, and I've got 3 here. We've got green, blue and clear, which is just to indicate our output. And then we've got this, which is a DC AC inlet connector, and that will just solder on the side. So that's basically all the bits we need to build a Eurorack power supply. Now the one thing that people always need to be wary of when building anything like this is the polarity. Now it's handy on this printed circuit board because you can see the little arrow there, and the arrow is, if we turn this around this way, it's probably slightly easier to see. The arrow is pointing that way, which means the stripe has to be that way, because the stripe is the plus end. So as long as the stripe of your diode, and this is a 1N, I think it's 1N4007s I'm using, but any rectifier diodes will kind of do the job. Then if it's pointing the right way, then you know it's in the right place. Resistors, on the other hand, you don't need to worry about because they are non-polarized. But the capacitors, they are also polarized, but they have there's like a little plus sign here on the circuit board. And also the plus sign is the long leg of the capacitor, so this will go in that way. and these are exactly the right size to fit. However, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to just solder in these low profile components. Now I thought this might be fun to do as a kind of a real-time build. So some of this is going to be quite long, and if you're actually planning on building one of these at home, then you can kind of follow the video. Now, as I said, I've actually placed these components in place, and I've now got the board turned over. And now it's just going to be a case of soldering in each component. So we lift the leg up there, we apply some heat, and then we add some solder. And all being well, that should then go in place. And there's the first leg of that diode there in place, and it's yes, where it should be. So now we're going to solder in the second leg. That's in as it should be. And now it's just going to be a case of me doing the same to all the others. Just making sure that's here exactly where it should be. Yep. So let's do the same for the next one now. Here's our next diode. If we look at that the other side, yeah, that looks okay. And once you've soldered in a couple of components, then it's usually an idea just to get your side cutters out and just snip off the legs, because then it just means there's less stuff lying around. And I actually keep a little box on my desk now, and I drop all the bits of metal into that, because then at some point then that can all just be recycled. Now we've got these two diodes here, and they're side by side, so they should be easy just to solder in. So again, I'll just lift the legs up slightly, because once they're flat they shouldn't move too much, and it just makes it neater. So those two soldered in, and now we'll do the other side. Okay, yep, they look good to me. So we shall now pop these out. 4 bits of wire into the box. So that's 4 of our 6 diodes. The other 2 are down here at the bottom, and they're next to these resistors actually. So I'm just going to just lift these up slightly, or keeping pressure onto the circuit board. And then that way they won't move. Okay, there's done. And yep, they're nicely in place there, as you can see. The next thing we need to do is we need to solder in these little resistors. And as I said, all these resistors do is they go in series with the LED, because you don't want the LED to burn out, so it limits the voltage drop and the current going to them. Now what you could do, if you really didn't need LEDs and you wanted to save a few pence, then you could just literally not bother with these at all. But as they're here, I quite like them. And also the great thing is, if you plug something into this power supply and there's a short or something's not right, the first thing that will happen is the LEDs will either dim or go out. And then if that happens, then you just need to knock the power off. Now looking at these there, yeah, see these, they're slightly at an angle, so I'm going to actually just keep my finger on the bottom, and I'm just going to reposition slightly. There we go. That's better. Yeah, that's now where it should be, I think. Which is good, I think. Oh no, that one's sticking up slightly now. So let's just push it in, heat it up. There we go. That's better, that's how it should be. So this resistor here is definitely okay. Let me just check check the other one next to it. Yep, that's okay too. Yeah, that's good. So we can take those wires out as well. Then we've just got this resistor here now. Yeah, that's not quite in place. It's slightly moved. So I'm just going to reflow that slightly because I don't think I put enough solder in. I just want it to be good and solid. Okay, that's better. And yeah, there's our all of our resistors and our diodes all in place, and that looks good. The next thing I'm going to pop in, I think, will be our... I'm going to put our connector in, actually. We can just stick our collector. Now, if you look at the circuit board, you can see there's a little recess there, or on the diagram, and that's showing you that that lines up with the slot on our connector. So if we make sure that's all in place, get the pins lined up, so that's where it needs to be. And what I tend to do with this is if I stick something underneath the other side of the board, I mean, it needs to just be something that's roughly the right thickness, and on this occasion I think my pliers will probably do the job. They're a little bit high, but basically you just want to make sure that that's flat, so it's not pointing at an angle when you solder in, and I think we're okay. So what I do with this, I do it the same way that I would do a silicon chip socket, and I would just stick a blob of solder in one corner, and then I do another blob in the other corner, and then I can take it out and just look at it, and I can actually see that I've actually not had that quite right in place. So I actually need to just adjust that slightly. And now it's flush. The socket there is, oh sorry, getting the right place. There you go, you can see it's nice and flush now, so that's good. I'm actually doing this while I'm wearing these funny glasses, so if I look at my reverse camera screen to make sure what I'm filming is correct, it's always completely blurred. Anyway, so all these pins need to be soldered in now. So we just do it one by one. And yeah, that's row's okay. Do this row. And I've made a schoolboy error there. And I had actually soldered two together, but if you just rub your iron in the middle and move it out quickly, it just makes a horrible mess. So what we need is our desoldering pump. In fact, I've done two of them. So let's just redo these. And it's very easy to do this, actually. It's very easy just to get two pins of either an IC socket or one of these connectors together. And especially when you get to a certain age, bit of Dempsey light, it's easy to cock up. And that's why I actually, you know, once I've soldered something like this, I will literally just look really closely with my magic glasses just to make sure that everything's tickety-boo, and it is. So that's now in place as it should be. The next thing I'm going to do is, I think, probably the LEDs. Now, the LEDs actually don't have a marking. They just have a square and a circle. But if we look at the layout on this occasion, I think the square is actually the negative for the LED. I think that's right. But actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave it till the end, because if I stick an LED in and if it doesn't light up, then I know it's the wrong way around. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pop in our little regulator. So this is our 78L05, which is a 5 volt regulator. And that literally just goes here. As I said, you can see the shape of the ice of the device there. And it's a semicircle, so we pop this in as if it's a semicircle. And this is actually out the way of everything else, so if we pop that in, you know, it doesn't have to be down super low or anything, but as long as it's roughly in place, that's good. And then we will then solder this in. So let's do that. Those 3 legs are in place, and we look at it here, and we look at it sideways on, and that looks pretty perfect. So again, get our trusty side cutters out. We will just take these legs off and pop them in the bin. And that's our 5-volt regulator in place. Now the next thing we've got are these capacitors. Now we've got 100 and 100 there. And I just happen to have in this bag some 100 microfarad capacitors. And these are electrolytics. And these, you know, you can pick these up for pennies. You know, the capacitors and resistors are so cheap. Yes, they come from China, and yes, some of them might be not so good, but in essence, I found that mostly they're okay. Now, as I say, these have 2 legs, a long leg and a short leg. You can just about see it there. The long leg is always the positive, and the positive is normally marked with a plus or a square, and that's what this has got. This has got a plus and a square. This side doesn't have the plus marking, but as all the other pluses are squares, then I think this is going to be okay. So let's pop that one in there in the middle. And we've got another one that goes right in the middle. Again, this is another 100 microfarad. So I think these are basically, I think these are post-regulator capacitors, and these are just like an extra bit of sort of fine smoothing. And they go in, so they go in there. So we've got them all the right way around. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bend the legs on the other side like this, just so they don't fall out really. And then we can solder these in. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm just keep my finger on the bottom of one of them, like that, just to keep it straight really. Well, actually, if I just hold it down, it's probably going to be okay. Maybe not. Yeah, I think, to be honest, even if I just leave it, it should be okay. Let me just whack some solder in here and let's see what it looks like. That's in place, and then I'll just straighten that leg. Solder that in. Let's have a look at that on the other side. And yeah, that's okay. That'll do the job. And we'll just do the same with the others now. So this bottom one down here. And the middle one here. Okay, they're all in. Let's look at the front, and yeah, that's all nice and respectable. So let's snip these legs off again. There's the first one. Okay, quick slurp of tea while you look at my capacitors, and as you can see, it's starting to take a bit more shape now. Ah, that's better. Now, the next job is going to be the regulators. Now, the regulators need to have a thing called a heatsink attached, which is basically just a piece of metal, and that's designed to get rid of excess heat. Now, the thing you have to be careful with heat sinks is that not all components, in fact a lot of components, the metal bit here is actually, you know, it's actually a thing. It's either going to have a positive or a negative, or, you know, something else on it. So you have to insulate it. And what you do is you do that by putting a rubber washer there, and then we pop our little screw through the hole. And then on the other side, we've got this insulation here. So it's insulated through the washer, which stops it touching the side, and this bit just stops it touching the rest. And then we pop our heatsink on top, and then that all sort of screws neatly together. So if we pop all that down, and we grab ourselves a cross-headed screwdriver, then we can screw it all together like a big sandwich. And providing you get it all in place, which I obviously haven't. What's happened here? Right, put that back in. Right, start again. So we take that out, we pop our little screw in there, like that. So that's now in place. I'll move this back a bit so you can see a bit better. Then we can then pop this into there. That should go near its hole. And then we screw it in. It's not liking this. Hang on. I'm actually going to get a different screwdriver. I'll use one of these. This is my trusty little multi-screwdriver kit that I bought from Trago Mills many years ago. It's got every kind of screw head you could think of every size, and actually, yeah, pop that in. There we go. So we now have our regulator on its heatsink, and that can then be soldered straight to the board. Now, some people actually will swap the heatsink around and have it going a bit more upwards, but I kind of don't think that's particularly a good idea. And this is the other thing that is slightly annoying about when you do buy all these parts from places like China, is everything, even though it's probably handy, it is a bit annoying that they all come in plastic bags. Because, you know, we all like to, you know, not waste plastic. And, you know, I keep all of them. I've got a big carrier full of little bags with the idea that I might use them one day. And, you know, you do sometimes. You know, I do use them when I'm sorting things out. But ultimately, I do feel having this hobby of electronics does create an awful lot of unnecessary waste. And certainly, you know, these heat sinks, you know, you buy them in packs of 10 or 20. There's no reason why everything couldn't just be dumped in one bag if it has to be in a bag. You know, I'd rather it was in a paper bag, but, you know, that's just how it is. Anyway, so here's our regulator. So this is our 7912, which is the minus 12 volt rail. So that is going to go in this way round because, again, if we look here, you can see there's like a thick line, and that's to represent the heatsink part of the component. So we pop that in there, and that also means there's space around the edge. Now, I need to check, but you need to look a bit careful because the heatsink could touch that diode. But as it turns out, it's okay. But it is quite close to that diode. So you do need to be a little bit careful. I would even think maybe just raising it slightly off the board might actually be better, because then that way, you know, it's not going to be touching. Again, these are slightly different to the heat sinks I've normally had, because some heat sinks, they've actually got like a pin at the bottom, and that is to use as a spacer to keep it off the board. So, yeah, and also you want to keep the heat off the board anyway. So I'm going to hold this upside down, but then I'm going to raise it slightly. And if I stick my pliers under there, is that high enough? Not really, no. I'm just going to do it by hand. So we'll just lift this up slightly. Not too high, just enough. And then I'll pop a blob of solder on one of the legs here. And then I'll do the same on the other side. I mean, you could always just, but what you could do is, instead of doing that, I just put it in place, right? Then I'm going to pull it down a bit, then I'm just going to bend the legs. So those two forward and that one back. So when it's hanging, you've got that gap there. So I'm going to do that with the other one as well, the 7/9. Check they're the right way around, and they are. So again, I've popped it in there, I've pulled it out slightly, bend, 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 leave them hanging, prop them up with something. If I use this box, that's probably do. Use the screwdriver handle there, that'll do. That's close enough. And then we can just solder them in place. Okay, they're in. There's no shorts. And that's actually pretty much straight. So let's grab our cutters again. I'm just going to hold this over the box this time just to take out the bits of metal. Okay, so we now have all our regulators in place, and we have these capacitors in place. The next thing is there's two capacitors here, and these are 1 microfarad capacitors. And I have some here, I think these are the ones. Yep, 1 microfarad. And I think these are 50 volts. Can't remember. Yeah, 50 volt. Which is good because, you know, as I say, higher voltage is better than lower voltage. So we'll pop those in. And again, long leg goes through the positive. So there's our first one in place, and I'll bend the legs so they don't move. And the second one goes in to the middle. And again, we just bend the legs, and then we will solder them in place. Hot iron, bit of solder. Always make sure the solder bit is shiny, that you've either tinned it or it's had enough solder on it from beforehand. Just always keep wiping it on your sponge. That's good, so those are in. So we can now take those legs off. And the next thing I want to put in is my connector. And this is just a bog standard, I say DC connector because they're mostly used for DC, although they're used for AC as well. And I've got one of my AC power supplies here, which I've just bought. And I wasn't sure if the connector actually fitted or not, but yeah, it does, it fits fine. So this is our AC power. And these you can buy on eBay for about £15. AC power supplies are generally more expensive than DC ones, and that's because inside one of these is just a big solid transformer, whereas your sort of Boss power supplies of this world, they have a little switch mode power supply, so these are actually more expensive to make. Anyway, we'll pop that into place here, and then I'm just going to keep my finger on the bottom because I don't want it to fall out, and I'm going to place some solder there, and I'm just going to solder one of the legs very, very roughly so it just doesn't move. Now what you can do with anything like this is if you want to stick it in place, get some masking tape and just wrap it around. Masking tape peels off really easily and it's strong enough. It's what I use all the time for soldering in things like silicon chip sockets, because it just keeps it in place. Because you don't actually want it to be rigid in place, you just want it just to not fall out the board. Because normally you can apply pressure from your hand or from the table or whatever you're resting your work on. Anyway, that's our inlet. So all we've got left now is our smoothing capacitors and our LEDs. Now, as I said, I should have put the LEDs in much earlier, but I'm still not 100% sure on the polarity. I think I know which way they go around, because I think it's opposite to diodes. It's a really weird thing. But let's pop in our capacitors. And this is the fun bit, because, you know, these are nice, big, chunky parts. And I've made a mistake. Because as you can see, they don't quite fit. These are actually slightly too big. Actually, no, they will fit. They will just fit. But as you can see here, they're almost touching those regulators. So I kind of wonder if I need to just bend these back slightly. Not very much. But yeah, if you just bend it back ever so slightly. I was a little bit worried then, actually, that there would be no room for any of this, but no, they are all correct. So we've got these here, but any higher voltage than 35 volts, I don't think they're going to fit on this board, or not easily. You might have to run them off onto a separate board, so it would make your compact power supply look like a Fender amp from the 50s. Now, on this side, there's some diodes, and they're just obscuring the capacitor. If I can just move it, I just moved it there slightly. It is very, very tight. I definitely should have got smaller. I should have got like 25 volt capacitors rather than 35 volt. Oh well, never mind. Where's our last one gone? It's here somewhere. There it is. It's rolled off. Anyway, all is not lost, because they do just fit. I mean, I'm sure I've seen these with these larger capacitors in before, you know. But got it all on the table, and I'm just checking. But of course, this is why you do these things last, because, you know, you'd never have got those little capacitors in place if you'd already put these in. And yeah, so they're not going to move anywhere, so it's just a case of soldering them all in. So one I missed right here. Good, they're all good. Get my little rubbish box. And bits of packaging's falling in there. I'll sort that out later. And the last four. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay then, that is our power supply almost finished. And I say almost finished because what we need to do now is just to check the LED status. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop one in the way round I think it should be. And then I'm just going to switch him on and see if he lights up. And if he doesn't, then either my power supply doesn't work, or I've got the LED in the wrong way around. So here we go, let's pop our power in. And no, it doesn't light up. So if I swap him, turn him round, then he does light up. So yeah, so the LED actually goes to the plus, to the positive goes to the circle. Now if I unplug this, you can still see the LEDs on, and the LED will stay on for quite a while, and the reason is that these capacitors just hold so much charge, they'll just keep things going forever. So yeah, so I'll pop that in there, give it a shake, and it'll still light up. It's like having handheld disco lights. And I'll do the same with this one. So that's our blue LED, that's super bright. That's a super bright LED, that is. You're not gonna not see that. And then we've got another LED somewhere. Where is it? Where's my other LED? Oh, I didn't hear a mo. Where's it gone? See, our middle one's starting to fade a bit, but don't worry, it'll stay lit for a while. Where's my other LED? Where's it gone? I chucked it in this box. I haven't. Oh, that's rubbish. That's absolutely rubbish. Some diodes there that I took out of something. I can't find my LED. I can't find my LED. Bizarrely, I've got a 7912 regulator there as well. Must have fallen out of the packet. Okay, well, in that case, I need to find another LED. And fortunately, LEDs are plentiful. And this was actually another Wish purchase. And I bought this bag of LEDs for £1 on Wish. Because I thought, you know, why not? So I want a yellow LED. So we've got a yellow. You know, let's have different colours. You know, red LEDs are boring for power. Traditional but boring. So we'll pop this in, and this needs to go with the long leg there. And yeah, if I just shove the power back in, we'll just see if this all lights up. And it does. There we go. They're all lit now. And we'll just wait for that to discharge, i.e. for it to go dark, because you don't really want to plonk a soldering iron on something that's got voltage on. I mean, you know, it's probably not going to do any harm, but you know, call me a traditionalist, but I just like these things to be nice. Now, I mean, if you were building this into a unit of some description, then you might well want to wire these LEDs out onto, you know, something else like a panel or something, and that's really easy to do. All you got to do is just pop some wires in, and that'll do the job. Right, this is the only one that's lit now, so I'll do the other two first, and probably by the time I've soldered them in, it would have got out. Yeah, they had gone out. So there's our LEDs in place. This yellow one's actually a little bit sticky outy. Let me see if I can just push that back down. There we go. Right, I've done that. And have I stuck them together? No, I haven't. That's good. Okay. And I think the others are okay. Yeah. So let's take these out. And there we have it. That is our Eurorack power supply, fully constructed and with nice bright LEDs to tell us our statuses of voltages. Now, just as a final thought, we could get the old voltmeter out. With a bit of luck, you should be able to see the voltmeter. So it's showing 0 at the moment, but if I tap on there, that should be -12, and that's showing -12. If I tap on here, it should be showing +12, which it is, and this one should be showing +5. Which it is. So we have now built a complete power supply for Eurorack synthesizers. And if you were to buy one of these ready-made, you know, it would cost you a few quid, but as it is, this will cost you around about, I think it's £12, 12 or £14 for the printed circuit board from Frequency Central. It was about £8 for the big capacitors. The small capacitors, you're not looking at very much at all, you know, and if you probably have them in your stock anyway, if you were going to be doing a lot of this sort of electronic stuff. And the LEDs are cheap as well, so you're probably talking, with your connectors and everything else, you're talking about £22, £23 in total. But this will power a good 6 or 7 Eurorack modules without too much trouble. Now, this one I've got here is actually going to stay in the workshop because I don't actually have a Eurorack power supply out here. So every time I build a new synth or a new module, then I will use this board to test it and test the power, even if I've got a very, very bright LED. But anyway, hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, then please like and subscribe as always, and I'll see you on the next one.